Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Municipal Center. This is June 15th, 2023, and you are attending the Zoning Board of Adjustment. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. All right. Yeah, retaining wall today. So welcome, and as your host for the evening, let's introduce ourselves all the way to the far left, please.
Introduce yourself.
Oh, good evening, Richard Tripp.
Michael Donlin.
Crystal Morin, Secretary.
I am Lynn Perkins, the chairman,
Craig Corbett, Vice Chair.
Jim Dietzel.
and we have Code Enforcement Officer Robert Mackey is with us as well, and our clerk, Ginny Rio, is in the back. She'll be taking the minutes for a meeting that will not go past 10 p.m. this evening. In the event of an emergency, please exit to the rear of the room. Do not use the elevators, and please shut off all cell phones, iPhones, iPads, anything that could create a distraction to the proceedings. And am I forgetting something? Oh, these are audio video recorded. So that being said, we have one case on the agenda for the evening, which is Daniel P. Lavalier, and that's case number is 23-116. Mr. Lavalier, would you come up, please? Mr. Donlin, would you sit on this case, please?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Singing is not necessary, but we do
Okay.
ask that you speak into the microphone.
That works.
We have a protocol I think you've been refreshed on by the
Yes.
code enforcement, and so we'll yield the floor to you and let you go on.
Okay, so the situation with this particular home, being a mobile home, well, what I'm trying to do is reclassify the land to turn into a two-family or duplex and identify the home as residential and not a mobile home on the tax record. The property, there's difficulty having it properly insured because of the, I don't know if you want to call it a stigma of a mobile home, and the values of properties going up are putting it in an area where it's not insurable.
Okay, so you have an
Or-
application. We'll ask you to read those 5 criteria
Sure.
right now.
Yeah, so criteria 1, the variance will not be in contrary to the public interest because there will be no exterior additions or structural changes made to the property. Spirit of the ordinance is observed because it's in accordance with what is permitted by 3 current abutting properties, which are duplex/two-family. Substantial justice is done. The current in-law apartment would be recognized as a dwelling house in the property not listed as a mobile home, allowing the value of property to increase, and will be insurable for its true value. The values of the surrounding properties are not diminished because there are no significant exterior physical changes happening to even cause any loss of value to an abutter. And for the literal enforcement provisions of the ordinance would result in unnecessary hardship. The classification of the property as a mobile home diminishes its value in conjunction with the connected in-law apartment not being recognized as a house, as it has been transformed from improvements made by prior owners of the property for many years. The proposed use is a reasonable one. The reclassification will make the property more in line, consistent with other properties in the immediate area.
Mr. Mackey, this is an MDR, correct?
Yes, it is.
What is our MDR definition in this area?
Well, MDR is 1 acre zoning with 125 feet of frontage, restricted primarily to single-family dwellings. We do allow, in any of the residential zones, we allow accessory apartments or accessory dwelling units, but those have limitations, mainly 800 square feet of living space. So in this particular case, I believe that in-law, quote, apartment that was created in the garage exceeds that square footage, so we really can't call it an accessory apartment. So hence the two-family that they're looking for.
Is this on town sewer? Or is it
No.
a septic?
Private septic. Yeah.
So would we even know if the septic is large enough for a separate in-law?
No.
All right, I yield.
Mr. Perkins, I have a question for Mr. Mackey.
Yes, sir.
So, Mr. Mackey, I saw, I don't know, jumping a little ahead, but I saw in the notes, one of the items here is that it's not within the board's purview to classify the home by removing the reference to a manufactured home, to a duplex, or to a two-family. But in the event that the board were to allow the second living area within this house, is this just setting up for them to meet with the tax assessor, or is there another step that would take place to that
Yeah.
point?
I mean, the way that I see this is certainly there are permitting records for the apartment that we're talking about, or the second dwelling unit, is in the garage. And I believe it's actually both levels in the garage. For
Yes.
the total square feet, so it's not just above, it's the whole garage. We do have permits in the file that were issued for the garage, I think back in 2013 or even later, and then there was a subsequent permit issued to add an addition to the garage. Then at some point, from a previous owner, the garage was converted to another dwelling unit. And there was another permit that had an attachment and a breezeway between the home and the garage. So obviously, we didn't issue permits for plumbing, electrical, and all the stuff that normally would have been taking place, had they gone the required route, again, previous owner. So this came to light because, as the applicant said, he contacted my office looking to have the property reclassified from a manufactured home to a two-family dwelling, because I guess being classified as a manufactured home, he's limited on the amount of homeowner insurance that he can get. And you can certainly correct me if I'm wrong here.
No, that's correct.
Yep. So when we looked at the whole situation and what we had for records, we said, well, number one, it's not within the purview of the zoning board. They can look at the whole zoning issue of, are you going to be allowed to have a two-family essentially on that property? But they can't, it's ultimately going to be up to the assessor on how they classify that. And if it's possible, it's one of those situations where it started years ago as a manufactured home, and then over the years, there were things added here, added there. So you still have that core of a manufactured home, but now you have a stick-built garage, a stick-built breezeway. I know in some correspondence that I had with the assessor's office, they're saying because it's still listed in the deed as a manufactured home, that they wouldn't be able to reclassify it, at least at this point. So what we were just discussing was, should the applicant be successful with this board, their next step would be to go to the assessor, and they even said maybe they could make an appointment to have somebody from their office come out, take a look at it. Ultimately, I don't have the answer of whether or not they would take away that manufactured home classification. Ultimately, there's still an underlying structure there that has a metal frame, although I think it might be on a foundation, the whole thing at this point.
It is definitely on a foundation, and yeah, definitely it's done to Boca rules to classify it as a.
So essentially, again, why they're here is to try to make the two-family legal before they pursue it any further as far as the zone, as far as the assessment
So
classification.
is the idea that the two-family increases your value so that you can get more insurance above?
Well, it increases the value, but right now we're insured through Foremost. Foremost is the only insurer for mobile homes up after a certain dollar value. So right now it's insured for $300,000. The other insurers of mobile homes, they stop at a certain point. So they're the only insurer that I could actually get it insured. We looked for ways around, how can we get insurance on this property? And with a business owner's policy, Concord Group gave me a quote. They said, this is a way that we can make this work. Their underwriters would actually have this property, if it were a multifamily, it can go under a business owner's policy.
I see.
So the business owner's policy can insure it upwards of 450,000.
So essentially, I think you cut me off, but
Oh,
by,
sorry.
by changing this over, the category allows you to get more insurance coverage.
Correct, yeah.
What did you purchase the property for?
It was it was 270 after fees and whatnot.
270?
Yeah. So it was on auction. It was a foreclosed home.
So if you were not allowed to have this, no, you may not. You may sit down, please. If you were allowed to have, I lost my train of thought there. So if you were only able to max out of the $300,000, your investment is still protected.
It is still protected, although I've, with the home, it's been cleaned up quite a bit. There was a decent amount of cost to clean that up. I mean, there was a mess inside as far as, debris, not debris, but belongings that were left behind.
Right, okay.
And whatnot, the yard, et cetera, so.
All right. Mr. Tripp, did you signal you wanted to speak?
Yes, I had a question. You've, in your application, you said you'd like to get this classified as a duplex?
Yeah, well, that was a question. I'm not familiar with this territory, so it's, not familiar with how this works, but
I was gonna say, there's other duplexes in your area?
yes. Yeah.
Are they the typical duplexes where they're, one half is one owner and one half is the other owner?
I believe so in the area. Yeah.
They are townhouse styles. I don't know that they're necessarily condoed. Mr. Mackey, if you want to speak to that.
Yeah, I mean, certainly, yes, if you look at that area around there, just like a lot of areas of towns, you'll see two-family dwellings. That's because prior to the, again, late 80s change of the zoning to the MDR and LMDR and all of that, pretty much everything that was residential was zoned general residential, which was basically 1 acre zoning with 125 feet of frontage, 1.5 acres, and you could build a two-family dwelling, which is why you see two families. So a lot of those originally started out as rental properties, but over the years they've been condexed. So without looking specifically at one particular property, but most of them, I'd say, do have like two separate owners these days.
I was gonna say, in New Hampshire law, the only way for two separate owners to have one building is to make it into a condo.
Right.
And
there's a process for doing that. It has to
process for
go
doing that,
and-
and,
yeah.
I just thought you might want to be aware of that,
Okay, I was.
because there's a significant amount of paperwork involved in that. Can I ask a question of
Yes, sure.
Mr. Mackey?
Yep.
Would a second residence on this property require an occupancy permit?
Yes, it would.
Do they
I
have
think-
an occupancy permit?
No. I think we were waiting, obviously, to see what happens at this hearing. I would think that should the applicant prevail and get his variance approved, which would allow for the second dwelling unit to remain, what we would do then would be require that he file basically for an after-the-fact permit. We'd need a layout of the property, then we would go through and inspect the property, note any deficiencies. Perhaps if we see something that raises a flag with the plumbing or the electrical, have him get the required licensed tradespeople in there to make the repairs. Then when my office was satisfied that it met requirements, then we would issue an occupancy permit.
All right, but,
Let me
Yeah. say again?
No, go ahead.
But if he continues down the route of it being a duplex condex, then that would be the only way where he could sell off the second building. Is that true? Would you have to split the property too? Or, no?
No, I mean, as you had just said, and I don't know what the applicant's intentions are, whether he intends to condex it as two separate units, and then, as you stated, there's a whole process for doing that, or whether he's seeking to live there, or whether he's seeking to own the property and rent out the two different halves, I'm not sure. But certainly, in order to sell each individual unit, then he would have to go through the condex process.
Process.
Would still be a single lot, just
Yeah.
like the duplexes are a single lot.
Yep, I was wrong when I implied that he could sell off the second half of the property. But I probably have some more questions, but not right now. Thank you.
Mr. Donlin?
I don't have any questions right now, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Dietzel?
Yeah, you said that the house needs, or has pretty much everything it needs, including plumbing and electrical, but you still have to have some sort of a heating unit installed, right? So it has no heat at all right now?
Yeah, so currently it was, when I purchased the property, it was heated by, well, the mobile home part, that is heated by electric, and there was a pellet stove.
Okay.
I felt uncomfortable with that.
Okay, so you're just
I don't wanna heat that.
replacing what's there now with something you find more efficient, or? no?
Yes, and there was a wood stove in so the garage, which over the years, via permits since 1996.
Yeah, because I was wondering how you can get an occupancy permit without heat, but you cleared that up.
Yeah.
Thank-
Oh, if I can explain.
Yes,
so-
you can. Mr. Dietzel, you have to slow down and just let one answer at a time, if you would, please. Go ahead.
So I was going to mention, I had an electrician apply for a permit today, I purchased mini splits a few weeks ago. So we were going to put hyperheat mini splits for what was formerly a garage, and put mini splits in for the mobile home part.
Okay, thank you.
And
I mean, essentially, the age of this house could have gotten an occupancy permit 30 years ago, Mr. Mackey, and the existing system could have been pulled out, and new system could be put in, and you don't need to reissue an occupancy permit. I don't know where the threshold is, Mr. Mackey. You're welcome to speak to that. Is it 50% demolition of a house or something?
That's basically what we would use as a guideline. I'm thinking we probably wouldn't be issuing a new CO for the manufactured home part, but certainly the newer apartment, once we were satisfied that that met the requirements. And the other thing I should mention, because you had brought it up, was, we don't typically, whether it's somebody doing an accessory dwelling unit, or certainly if it's a two-family on private septic, which we don't get too much these days because of the zoning, but they would be required to have a new septic design done that would account for the additional uses and so forth for the two units and so forth.
Yeah, that's a lot of consumption. That's a large increase of consumption in the septic. I was going to ask, what size is the lot?
the lot is about 3/4 acre, just under.
Yeah, okay. Certainly something that needs to, can be considered, but I wanted to go back for a minute here to the condexing part of it and what you're trying to achieve, which is trying to ensure all of your liability. And that's the reason that you're trying to do this. You see the value of this parcel with the buildings being larger than it currently is.
Yes.
But if you're in a situation, Mr. Tripp, Mr. Mackey can chime in on this, where you end up having to condo or condex this garage as a living quarters, doesn't that take you right back to square one, where essentially your value is only in the mobile home again? If you have to you're essentially subdividing the units on the lot.
Yes, as a condo or condex, that would be the case, but as a multifamily, that would not be the case. As a multifamily, then, as far as the insurance is concerned, I could then get a business owner's policy to cover the liability of, for that property.
Does that work in regards to the laws Mr. Tripp and Mr. Mackey have echoed back and forth? Is that permissible here, or are we unsure?
Well, I suppose that if under the underwriters, they consider it or a multifamily for the purposes of insuring it. That's all well and good. From a zoning perspective, we would consider a multifamily 3 or more units. But I think, for just the purposes of what he's trying to accomplish and getting it insured, if they want to call it, as opposed to a condex or a duplex, it's a multifamily because it's more than one unit. That's fine, but technically by our zoning, a multifamily is 3 or more units. So we would still look at it from a zoning perspective, it's a 2-family.
Okay. All right, very good. Ms. Moore, anything from you?
I don't at this time.
Okay, anybody else have anything they wish to ask?
I have another
Sure.
question. I finally, another approach that you thought you could take was maybe classify the garage as an ADU? And that would, you said that the garage is too big to qualify as an ADU?
Yeah, I believe I read, typically, the town's regulations for an accessory dwelling unit limit that to 800 square feet. In this case, I think that unit, when you take the 2 floors into account in the garage, it's more like 1,700. I think in the past, we've had cases come before this board where maybe somebody was seeking some relief to the size of an accessory dwelling unit, but usually it's within that range. Where this one is more than double, we thought it more appropriate to send it looking to be a 2-family, because it really is way larger than what a typical accessory dwelling unit would be.
And I believe there's such a thing as a detached condo, which would make this, the 2 buildings, acceptable under.
Well, yeah, again, one of the town's requirements for an accessory dwelling unit is that it has to be attached to
Yeah.
the main structure, although state law says you can allow them as detached, so some towns let you do that. But in this particular case, there is a structural attachment, there is a breezeway between the garage and the home, the manufactured home, so we would consider that attached anyway.
Oh, all right. So this is a novel situation.
Sure.
I'm wrestling with it in my mind, how to,
Okay.
so,
Are you currently residing at Donald Street in Bedford?
I am, yeah.
So you're not going to be living at this facility?
I've debated it, so I'm kind of on the fence with that, depending on,
Okay, so, but right now, currently Donald Street is your legal
that's
address?
primary address, yeah.
So, Mr. Mackey, if I may,
Yep.
if they, when the breezeway is attached, so technically it's like part of the other dwelling, my understanding of reaching back in the cobwebs is that a lot of that was the size of the garage matters, whether it's attached or not. Like if it's strictly detached and the breezeway kind of, anyways, so if it's technically attached to the house, how would the apartment building in the garage not just be like an additional bedroom to the house?
Well, again, typically, we make the designation, if that is a complete second living unit, typically meaning it has a kitchen and all the provisions for cooking and all of that, then we would consider that a separate dwelling unit, closed off, there may be a breezeway in between, but has its own entry in and out, has a full kitchen, then we're gonna look at it as a separate living unit.
Very good. And then, to the applicant, there was signs of people already occupying this garage when you purchased the home?
Yes, definitely, yeah.
How is it marketed?
And it's been for years. This was on auction, but looking at there's a past listing from, on Zillow, and it was listed as an accessory, or not an accessory, but an in-law apartment.
I see.
which is an ADU.
Well, yeah, I guess the terminology's been changed for, 4 years now, but some of us veterans on the board might recognize a difference.
I did see previous listings too, when I
Yeah.
looked it up. It said a mobile home and then it described an extra area, and it had pictures of a bathroom and a kitchen, so it said a apartment without saying apartment.
Got it. Okay.
Right, and that makes sense too, because looking at the assessor's report, we have one floor is finished, and they're claiming the other one was unfinished on here as well. You know, because when you add up the two of them, you would have been exceeding what could have been an in-law.
Yeah.
But is there a bathroom in it,
Yes, yeah.
and there's cooking area?
There's a cooking area and
So it's habitable.
countertops. There were, in the previous listing, there were appliances and there was a living area.
Yeah, I saw a stand-up shower.
Yeah, this is a stand-up shower and you know, it's a 3/4 bath, so.
Okay.
Would-
Anything else from anyone?
Yeah, if I may.
Yep.
So if we're considering this as a completely detached other than the breezeway, it's its own home. In a 24 by 40, if I'm reading this correctly, which is not a little home. Like, would your problem with the insurance company go away if you just got rid of the trailer?
It could, but that would be, yeah, that would probably be a financial loss in a sense.
I mean, it sounds like you're in a pretty precarious situation either way,
Yeah,
so.
I wasn't aware of when I purchased this of, I'm going to call it a stigma of a mobile home because there's a few things that I didn't realize they're just issues with title, there's issues with insurance, and so I wasn't aware of these liabilities. So.
As I'm sure most people wouldn't be, but
So
doesn't change it.
is this on a slab? Or is it-
Nope, it's on a the mobile home is on a full foundation, and there's a basement.
And there's a basement?
Yes, yeah. So, looking through past permits, I do have an exhibit if you wanted to read through it. I did bring a copy, but I made copies of the past permits just showing slowly that garage turning into a home other than having adequate heat. So the last permit was in
Or
2020 for plumbing, so.
I think Mr. Mackey has indicated there were several permits at different times since 2013, correct?
Yeah, I believe, yeah, I mean, there was original permit, there might have been one for putting a foundation. There's been a couple of porch permits over the years, then there was a permit for the garage years ago, then a permit to add an addition to the garage, and a permit to install the breezeway. Again, we don't have a permit. I believe the permit for the garage said storage up above, so that's the rub. We don't have permits for the actual complete living unit that was put in there.
Okay.
I have a question for Mr. Mackey.
Mrs. Corn?
Because it's under an acre, do they need a variance for that as well, if we're gonna reclassify it?
Well, I don't think so. I mean, because there really is no, at this point, because it's in a single-family zone, there really isn't a guidance as to what the lot size would be for a two-family in that zone. So, again, I think the most critical thing would be to make sure that the lot itself could be done by a licensed septic designer.
Right. So the trailer is a two-bedroom?
The trailer is a 3-bedroom, and there are 2 bedrooms in the garage upstairs.
So it'd be a five-bedroom septic, minimum.
5 bedrooms, and typically, because just like with an ADU, when you do the design calculations for septic system, it's a little bit more than just strict bedrooms, because I think they're taking into account that you're going to have 2 kitchen sinks, probably gonna have 2 laundries, so there's a little bit higher lot loading than just strict bedrooms.
Okay, anybody else have any questions? You have someone accompanying you with, I'm not sure who he is, if he, we're gonna give.
Yes, this is Ed Berthium, who found the property for me. He's a very good friend of mine. I've known him for years, and he just had input on as far as where the property's been cleaned up. So it's I don't know if
Well, so we're going to make a call to public right now, and first call will be anybody who wants to support the application, which anyone can speak to. We're going to have some phone numbers posted up on the screen momentarily, and Mr. Corbett can do the honors of announcing those.
Yep, anybody at home who wishes to dial in, please dial 646-558-8656. Your meeting ID is 323-909-140, and then press star 9 to raise your hand. If you're having any technical issues, please dial 603-845-5585, and someone will help you.
Very good. So at that point, that announcement applies to anyone in the room that would like to speak favorably to this application. You may come forward at this time. And the applicant will have an opportunity to rebut or follow up on anything that's said, okay?
okay.
Good evening. And your name?
My name's Edward Berthium.
Okay.
Did you guys want copies of what we put together for the permits and any other pictures or anything like that? No? Okay. Okay, the property when we bought it, well, he bought it, but I mean, I pretty much went in, I cleaned it up. I mean, the place was trashed. I took out like 8 or 9. I have a big box truck, and I mean, I filled this thing right to the front, back, top, sides, like 8 or 9 times and took it to the Manchester dump. I used to go to Pinkerton, like years ago. I lived in Derry for like 10 years. And basically, I ended up taking like 10 loads of garbage out of this, off the property and in the property. The carpet in there was trashed. The paint was just atrocious. They had, for baseboard molding, they had half-inch corner round instead of baseboard. So what we did is we repainted it. We put carpet and a little bit of tile in a couple places, and we put real baseboard in it to make it, you know, like modernize it a little bit and make it nicer, because it was really trashed. The yard was just full of, it was like, I don't even know, there was this big, huge, like a oil drum that was cut, the top of it was cut off. It was filled with like food cans, like homeless people living there. But anyways, the weird part is, when we went to look at the property, we knocked on the door because it was owner occupied. We were thinking about buying it, and we went and knocked on the door. I known this guy since I went to Pinkerton. I've known him for 40 some odd years. I knew the guy, like, personally, and he ended up showing us around the place. And as for the septic, I know you were talking about the septic. He's been telling me he had I don't know, he had some sister-in-law or somebody. He had some friends or family. Somebody was living in the in-law apartment and had been the whole time he'd been there. Somebody was living in it prior to that. He never had any problems with the septic, and he never had any problems. We actually had problems with the well, so we actually replaced the pump itself. We pulled the pump out and replaced it. And so it's got a brand new well pump. The septic, we had a friend of ours, well, a friend of mine actually, who does septics, come down. He didn't come down and like give us a certified thing or anything like that, but he just did it as a favor for me. I asked him to come down and check it out, and they have this like beeping responder, or I don't know what it's called, transponder or whatever it's called, that you take and you flush down the toilet, and it goes to like the ends of your septic, right? And he also did some other tests. He did a bunch of perk tests all around the yards. He dug a bunch of holes, and he had us flush the toilets in both units to see what happens with the baffles and the stuff that's in the tank itself. I mean, I'm not a septic, I'm just telling you what he's been telling me and what he showed me. But I guess he said that everything seemed amazingly perfect, it was good. And the guy that I knew, who was losing the property to the bank, he said, and I asked him, I said, do you have any problems with septic or anything like that? And he says, we've never had any problems at all. So, I mean, if you needed a septic person to come in and do a thing, I mean, it's not a big deal. But, and as for the trailer itself, I'd say about 90% of that trailer has been replaced, and there was permits pulled for plumbing in both buildings, in the barn. I believe there's some in here, I'm not sure if they're in this packet, but there were plumbing permits pulled. There were, first they did was they bought the trailer, they put that on a foundation. Now that foundation has 8x8 solid wood beams, and they go across, I think it's 14 feet across, so they're 14 feet, and then it has the trailer beams, there's just two steel beams that run along a trailer, and they're sitting on top of these 8x8 beams, which I believe are probably about 8 feet apart, maybe 10 feet apart, the whole length of the thing. Put it this way, you walk down this thing, and, most houses, I built houses most of my life, and I'll tell you right now, this thing don't even jiggle, it don't wiggle, it don't squeak, it's like solid as a rock. It's solider than any house I've ever built, put it that way, because of the steel beams and the beams that it's sitting on. And it's got a full foundation, and it's not like, a crawl space. It's got, it's got a slab for the basement. It's got solid cement walls, and it's not brick or block. And you have to reach up to touch the beams. They're high. It's like, it's not like a low thing.
Yeah.
And,
So it sounds like you have a good structural building there, but there's technicalities to this that go beyond what you've
No, I understand that, yeah.
expressed. And one of the things that I think you started to open up with was giving supportive information to the extent of the work that the applicant has had to do to the property. I am curious, what happened to the lunch truck? Did you have to remove the lunch truck?
A what?
Used to be a
Didn't
lunch
this
truck
had
at
the
the
lunch
property.
truck,
I'm
right?
not
That went in prior
sure
to
what
this owner.
happened to the lunch truck.
A lunch truck.
Yeah, it was two
Former
owners
owner,
ago.
Bella Vance, had that lunch truck that he would park there.
I have no idea who that is.
It
that
seems
I
like
looked up the permits. There was a guy that had a tractor trailer permit to park a tractor trailer there.
Right.
I don't know anything about no lunch truck. But there was a permit when I went to City Hall before we purchased it. I went down and pulled everything they had in your file to see what was going on. But they had permits for everything. They had a 24x12 addition put on the front of the trailer. They had a deck, like attached to the front of that. All the windows have been replaced, but, this trailer's been pretty much replaced, about 95% of it
Let me
has been
just hold you
replaced.
up. It's not about the quality of the trailer.
Yeah, no, I'm just saying, but it's not a
I
trailer.
understand what you're saying.
In
but
any way, shape, or
It's not about
form.
the quality of the trailer.
Yeah.
And I think to the point about the septic is that you have to be able to, and I know this historically, if this board were to grant this approval,
Yeah.
you would have to have a licensed designer do test pits and.
Yeah, to reassess it.
Make sure that you could accommodate the extra load of a two-family on the property, not just the one that's there. And looking at this, 1,000 gallons seems rather small, or seems on the small side in my experiences for a three-bedroom, but the DES requirements have
much.
bounced around a bit, I think.
Pretty much for 3 and over, you're gonna be looking at a 1250.
That's what I thought, and so, anyway, and that's just by my
That
own
would be just for the
experience.
trailer, you're saying?
I'm sorry?
Would that be just for the trailer you're talking about, 1250?
For a three-bedroom, and then when you add in the extra living spaces, you need to be able to prove that you can, in a design, that if that system fails, that you have enough land mass to accommodate the extra living space, which is the additional apartment with the living space. And as Mr. Mackey has indicated, it's not just adding bedrooms, it's now a separate living space, so there's a consumption factor that's added to the additional bedroom capacities,
I understand that, yeah.
okay?
But-
And so outside of the condition of the mobile home, I don't think this board is really too concerned about that, other than the extent that you've shared that the work that you helped assist the applicant on cleaning this up, which I think he was addressing as part of your hardship. Am I correct, Mr. Lavalier?
Yeah,
Yeah, okay. Who's living in the property currently?
no one.
No one, okay. How come?
No one, it just needed to be cleaned up. Right now, it's,
It was a mess.
I think it can be occupied. yeah,
Okay, so you're able to rent it out at this time if you needed to?
Yeah.
Okay, very good. Any other questions from anyone?
So,
Mr. Tripp?
so the dairy zoning has no allowance for a two-family, multifamily property? Because multifamily is three or more.
Yeah, I mean, right now, the only district where, well, two districts where, well, if we're talking multifamily, we do have the medium-high-density residential zoning district, which is mostly towards the downtown and most of the lots served by town water, town sewer. That does allow for single families, two families, and multifamily. And then we do have a multifamily district, like where the Fairways is, that's in a multifamily zone, that sort of thing. But the only place right now where we allow two families would be in the MH, the medium-high-density residential.
Yeah, because
Which
I'm
is
just trying to figure out
downtown.
how this would fit into our residential scheme. And it, you know, your plan of making it a duplex condex type thing, I believe would probably work, but just making it a two-family.
Well, I think by zoning, it wouldn't be allowed. By what's actually out there, because again, as I explained about general residential, at one time you could have two families. So I'm sure as you drive up the bypass, you're going to see some duplexes or two-family dwellings, just because at one time they were a permitted use. So I think the applicant has shown in part of his testimony or part of his information that as you go up the bypass in the vicinity of this particular property, there are some two families. So.
Yeah, we had the parcel up there, not too far up from this property where the house had burned and under tragic circumstances. And I remember the applicant who bought that parcel, just the foundation at that point, came forward to the board. And he wanted to put a two-family on, but the board had denied it. Not that that's a precedent in this matter, but I think that it just kind of demonstrates that over time, the variations that can go on in that zone after it's been rezoned and recategorized. So. Anything else, Mr. Tripp?
No, thank you.
All right. Anybody out there remotely, Mr. Provencher, that would like to speak to this? Okay, very good. So let's make a call to anyone who's opposed to this, which we provide that opportunity for folks remotely as well. Anybody that would like to speak in opposition to this application, this is your opportunity to come forward at this time. Per Mr. Corbett's instructions, please press *9 and we'll get you into the meeting. You seeing any indications out there, Mr. Provencher?
Seeing none, Mr. Chair.
All right, very good. So it looks like we've met the statute for butter input. So at that point, Mr. LaValle, you're free to make any other follow-up statements if you'd like. You don't have to, but you can.
Yeah, I think I'm fine at this
Said
point.
everything you thought you could, okay. Anybody have any other questions?
Chair, I'll make a motion to go in deliberative.
I'll second it.
Mr. Moore, Mr. Corbett made the motion, Mrs. Moran made the second for deliberation. I'm pausing, so I want to make sure we got everything in that I think would be of consideration, but like many things, escapes me at this point. So that motion's on the floor. Could I have all in favor, please?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, so we're in deliberation, which the board will evaluate the contents of the testimony and the application at this time singularly. Anybody wish to lead off? Mrs. Moran, you have any thoughts here?
I don't right now.
Okay, Mr. Donlin.
This is a little bit unique in that the person seeking relief is not the one who made the injustice, for lack of a better term. I am somewhat, actually, that's all I got right now.
All right, Mr. Corbett?
I agree with Mr. Donlin that it's definitely unique in the scenario or the predicament that the landowner finds himself in is, definitely tough. It is on there, one of the terms of an auction, they're getting it as is, but looking at this, I am empathetic to the insurance issue, you know, just for getting, being able to protect your investment. I understand, you know, purchasing it roughly 270 prior to the work that goes into it, but even just looking at, you know, some of the history on the house, how it, prior to the foreclosure, it was selling for over 310. You know, we don't have the second area in here finished, and it's a larger area. I just look at it, and I think right off the bat, I can see that by next year, the assessment should be correcting itself, and now you're just in a tough spot where you're gonna have a property potentially assessed, you know, above what you can insure it for, and I think trying to fix this situation is probably the best thing that could be done for them. I unfortunately just see a hardship here.
Mr. Tripp? Would you like me to go?
Sure.
I mean, I understand this, and I, from the sounds of it, this is an investment, and I think Mr. Corbett just touched on that. And I get a little sense, I'm empathetic at different times where there's investment properties involved, but I get a little concerned when there are investors that are purchasing property, but they don't do their due diligence. And, you know, we've had these kind of cases before where folks have come in to invest in parcels and real estate, and they don't take the time to do the proper research that they should be doing when they're doing this. Now, we have also had cases where this board has been empathetic and granted relief on such circumstances. But I'm a little concerned here because this applicant does not reside. This is not his residence at this time. And so the relief that's being sought is, I think, more characteristic of what would be asked might be if somebody who's moved into the property and finds out that the parcel has an issue that they were blindsided with, and even as an investor or someone who says, yeah, I bought this, I moved into it, and now I can't get homeowners insurance because the value of the buildings I can't get coverage for. But that doesn't seem to be this case, and that's one of the areas that I'm getting tripped up on here and how it rolls towards hardship. Mr. Tripp, anything from you?
Well, I agree with you that apparently the applicant, you know, purchased this property, you know, hoping to correct the deficiencies, but it's one of these things where if you're aware that the in-law apartment was not approved for occupancy, and you're aware that it was zoned for single family, you know, it seems that, you know, trying to make all these changes to make things right is a little, you know, late in the game, because, and it appears to me that you're not really familiar with New Hampshire law and what is permitted, you know, for duplexes, or you know, and it seems that making it a two-family is a solution, but there's a lot of hoops to jump through to achieve that, and I don't think it'll fit into the neighborhood. I think that there's too many things that are outstanding already that could make this a compliant property. So.
Yeah, I go back to the spirit of the ordinance, and obviously we transitioned our zoning to get out of what was there, which was general construction, or however it was mentioned by Mr. Mackey earlier, specifically to try and evolve away from the zoning and putting, in this case, a two-family on this lot seems to be, certainly fits as far as the spirit of the ordinance goes. Mr. Donlin, you have anything, thoughts there?
Well, I certainly agree with you that lack of due diligence doesn't exonerate you from hardship. I'm kind of struggling along those same lines as if it's, if you don't, that you weren't, that again, that you weren't blindsided, and that's why I led off the conversation by saying that at least this isn't the person who deliberately went after this with, malice, so.
Sure.
But again, if, sometimes you just have to learn not to touch the stove, and until you touch the stove, you don't learn not to touch the stove. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Well, the other thing is, if, right now, the septic is marginally compliant for a three-bedroom home. And to add another 2 bedrooms or another dwelling is gonna stress it even more. And then we have the situation where this is, what you said, a 3/4 acre property?
Yes.
So is there even enough land for them to replace the septic, should it be required? I think there's just too many hurdles to jump to bring this into compliance.
Mr. Corbett?
This is the way where I'm stuck, and I look at it is, what happens to this living area if we say no? What happens to the garage as it's already existing today? Now, it can't be rented out, but it's still there. We still kind of have the problem that's here with the property. It's not that we're asking to build, and I get that's where I'm stuck. It's not that we're asking to build something that would, that's continuing to do this. It's almost, Mr. Allen's point, it's been designed kind of secretly. It's an opportunity to tighten it up a bit, but I don't, again, we say no, it can't be rented, but, even if it wasn't being rented, what happens to that portion of the garage? Do we have to strip it? I mean, how do you?
Well, we have historically had cases like that have occurred, but understand, and as far as Mr. Tripp goes, there was some significant area in the backyard where the septic is drawn, so I can't say that it can't get the proper septic system for what's there. But if they can't get that septic and they find out that they can't do anything with it anyway. They can't make it a residential area, period. And that's not on this board, that's on design criteria. And if you understand development of real estate and some of these things, that is what you would be faced with. Mrs. Moran, anything from you?
I'm still kind of stuck. I like to look at the GSI and hope that we as a town messed up, but everything on the GSI says mobile home, unfinished garage, it's right there to be seen before you buy it.
Okay.
Not that it really is, it speaks, I'll touch on this for a moment because it does speak somewhat to a hardship, or at least as presented. But as not being an insurance agent myself, I'm not really sure that this even solves the problem, because let's just say that it's a 2-family and it's an income property, so now it's gonna fall as a business. Well, what happens if you resell the house to one owner who's not running it as a business? Then the problem still exists.
Well, that would be unless because it's dependent on the tax assessor changing.
Right, but
Classification.
nothing about that is changing right now, and that's a coin flip at best.
Well, right, but that's why we're not changing this to a 2-family. We're approving the second living area within the garage. And I think we've kind of shifted into the 2-family, multifamily duplex convo, whereas it's noted it's not in our purview. That's not our decision. What we're ruling on is if the second room in there could be a living area.
Right,
Still has to be ruled on by somebody else after the fact, but we're almost opening it up for the further review is how, the way I'm looking at it.
Okay. Mr. Tripp, anything further?
Nope.
Mr. Donlin, you all set?
I am all set, Mr. Chair.
Would there be any other conditions that would be of concern to the board if you were to approve this? We have our typical subject to obtaining state inspections and permits, which would also be the septic plan in order to be able to move forward with that. But is there any other considerations because we've had to delve into a lot of different things, the insurance and the condex conversation, which I think we can steer away from. But is there any other considerations that the panel would like to have as part of the motion? Seeing no gestures there, all right. So we can stick to the one condition, which is most common to our motions for approval. And if there is nothing else, we can take a motion to come out of deliberation.
The-
Make the motion.
Pause.
Yeah, just 1 second.
Okay? Or pause.
Just, for me, it is caught a little on the language where we have it that we can't reclassify by removing the reference to a manufactured home, but then in our motion to result to creation of a two-family dwelling, can a manufactured home be a two-family dwelling by definition? Because those two, the way I'm reading that, those two lines do contradict each other from the staff report to the motion.
So the request to allow a second living unit, I think if I was to reference Mr. Lavalier's testimony, allows him to recategorize the property that gives him some protections.
Right, but that was with, the insurance company would name it multi-family, but our definition is then 3 families or more, where the two-family, then that one still didn't go into play. I guess my question is, does the definition of manufactured homes include a two-family dwelling?
Well,
Because if it's not, if it's still a manufactured home, would it be I guess that's kind of where I'm stuck, because that does seem like two different types of property.
are you playing mind games with me?
No, and it's the way I've been looking at this the whole time. That's why I asked if we're approving, we're not necessarily, because we wouldn't necessarily be approving the two-family if the tax assessor says no, right? We're allowing the opportunity for the tax assessor to say, to change their ruling on the house. We're not, we're allowing them to say it's a two-family is how I look at it. We're not making that full decision right now.
Yeah, so we are granting approval of the code enforcement department to recategorize, to give the green light for this. I suppose the assessor could go back there and say, okay, well, if the zoning board and the code enforcement department say, yeah, it's a two-family residence property, that's how we're going to assess it and tax it, right? And you can rent a mobile home.
Right, but I guess, or they say, no, we're just gonna deem this a 4-bedroom manufactured house.
Do we know how many bedrooms are designated in this 1,700 square foot apartment?
They requested
The testimony was 2.
Yeah.
Two, okay, so 2 bedrooms.
Because
So
we have,
that's
but we have it
5.
on the record as 3, but
Well, that would be 5 bedrooms total.
because that's including the one that's already inside the garage.
2 in the garage, 3 in the mobile home.
We have 1 captured in the garage already. We're ruling on the 2nd in the garage.
No.
No, there's 3 in the mobile home and 2 in the garage.
All right, so that's where I'm getting lost. That we've had 1 in the garage already. We're just ruling on number 2. That's where the clarification
Well, we have 3 in the mobile home, 3
Correct.
bedrooms.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm focused on the garage portion.
I understand.
Yeah.
But I'm just seeing 2 bedrooms in the garage, period. Which we're looking at this as a 2-family, not a multifamily, correct, Mr. Mackey? Yeah, okay.
Got it.
Now, is the garage, the 2 bedrooms that currently exist, that's in the first floor of the garage?
I believe the testimony was the 2nd floor of the garage.
Second floor?
And there's a family room down below. And somebody had mentioned it was unfinished, but it was finished, except for
I
the
guess-
floor.
Is the garage used as a garage?
No car,
What?
no car.
Yeah, only the GSI says that it's unfinished.
Did anybody hear anything throughout the testimony as to whether do you remember specifically, was the walkthrough, he mentioned that prior to the purchase at the auction, correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, would, I'm sorry I keep going back to the septic, but, you know, this is one of those things where we have, right now, we have a 5-bedroom property, you know, with multifamily. But, you know, what's to say that someone's not going to come in and put 2 more bedrooms in the garage?
And make a 7-bedroom?
Yeah. It's, now,
These things happen.
these things happen, but this would be something that theoretically, you'd have to apply for a permit,
Theoretically.
you know, theoretically. Now, and in this case, theoretically is disproven, because, which is not to say that you would do something like this, but, you know, there's,
My recollection, excuse me, is that this is probably the 3rd or 4th property up in this area that, all the years I've been on the board, that has had this kind of thing where someone has bought it thinking there's an apartment there and then finds out afterwards, and they don't look at the tax deed, they don't look at whatever, and then they get caught with we can't get X, Y, or Z, and we need relief. So these kind of things do happen.
I feel like
There's one.
typically we see it at closing, though. And where we're caught up is that the bank won't allow the sale to go through unless they get a clarification cleaned up, because I'm thinking of a very specific case as you say that. And I think we've had 2 of them. Both times the bank was the holdup. They wouldn't allow for the mortgage to, or whatever, the final papers to be signed for at closing without
There was
us determining it.
one by
We certainly
D
didn't
and
get a
J
mortgage without insurance.
Landscaping too, but they had already purchased it. And if this was auction, it may not have gone through a bank. I don't know, I wasn't there.
Well, we have had one property in particular where somebody has bought it under the impression that it was a multifamily and found out well afterwards it was not.
Yeah, there was a
But
3-family.
they were also residing in it,
Yeah, so they're not the second
Russell,
floor,
what?
3rd floor.
residing in it.
oh,
We were thinking about residing, but it wasn't residable.
So we paused at Mr. Corbett's consideration. You ready to move
Yeah,
forward?
ready.
Or you
Yeah.
want to have more discussion about anything else? Okay. So we can take a motion to go into deliberation,
We're already
come
there.
out of it, I mean.
I'll make a motion to come out of deliberation.
Mrs. Moran has a motion.
I'll second.
Mr. Donlin has a second. You all set, Mr. Corbett?
Yes.
All right. Mr. Tripp?
I'm all set.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Very good. Mrs. Moran, you have a motion to read.
I do, thank you. I make a motion on case number 23-116, Daniel P. Lavalier, to grant a variance to the terms of Article 6, Section 165-46.a of the Town of Derry zoning ordinance to allow the existing second living unit installed in the existing garage to remain, resulting in the creation of a 2-family dwelling at 119 Bypass 28, parcel ID 08161, zoned MDR, as presented with the following conditions. We have 1, subject to obtaining all state and town permits and inspections. And that concludes the reading of the motion. I need a second.
Second it?
Mr. Tripp has a second. That motion's on the floor, and the chair will yield to Mr. Corbett for the reading of the finding of fact or the finding of fact process.
So the board also includes all facts found in the meeting minutes for the application, and incorporates all meeting minutes into its finding of facts and decisions. The board's found that the property is zoned an MDR, currently listed as a 3-bedroom manufactured house. Permits were previously filed to build a garage and an addition above the garage, amongst others, but never to be used as a second living unit. The square footage for the unit exceeds the allowance for an ADU. It's not within the board's purview to classify the home by removing the reference to a manufactured home, and no structural changes are proposed at this time. That concludes the finding of fact for this. Does anybody have anything to add?
No.
Very good. Seeing no gestures there. Thank you, Mr. Corbett. All in favor of moving Mrs. Moran's motion for a vote, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Hearing none. Mr. Corbett?
I vote yes on this one, in favor of the proposal.
Very good. Mr. Tripp?
I vote no. I don't think that the property is feasible for a multifamily units.
Very good. Mr. Donlin?
Mr. Chair, I'm gonna vote yes. As a,
Okay.
yeah.
Mrs. Moran?
Chair, I'm gonna vote no. I don't see the hardship in it. I see that everything was displayed as it was.
Very good. The chair will vote no as well. As I mentioned earlier, I don't align with the hardship on this. Spirit of the ordinance continues to set up to transition from this zoning, and so I have my concerns with that as well, but primarily my concerns are with the hardship and whether or not the proper due diligence and whether the relief being sought is just. So I'll leave it at that. Mr. Lavalier, you're denied by 3-2. If you have, you yourself or anybody else has any grievance with this, you have an opportunity within 30 days to file for rehearing. After that would be recourse to Beach Superior Court.
May I speak?
Thank you. Yep.
Well, I understand is you're saying that the septic may not cover whatever's there. From what I saw from the permits, they did pull permits for everything. They did pull plumbing permits for the bathrooms and the
What I will
kitchen
recommend
also.
to you is that if you have input on this, you can give it to Mr. Lavalier, or he can file for an appeal
well-
or a rehearing.
What my suggestion is if we get some septic person that's licensed to come in there and
This board has just
do
made
whatever
a
they gotta do,
decision. That
file
decision
for a
has been made.
certificate of
You're dismissed.
occupancy.
Have a good evening. Mr. Lavalier, I would suggest you and your cohort depart the room. I've given you legal instructions, and you can reflect on these with code enforcement if you'd like. My suggestion is you use your partner's information if you wish to compile a request for rehearing, okay? On considerations on merit of the hearing.
Okay.
All right?
Thank you for your
Thank you.
time. Thanks.
All right,
Have a
thank
good
you.
evening.
All set?
All right, and next up, we have no correspondence. I don't have any other business. I'm sorry, again?
I'm gonna make a motion to table.
Oh, yes, it was, yeah.
I'll just call that out now.
Okay, so the minutes, a motion on the minutes, please, Mr.
Chair, I'd like to make a motion to table the minutes from June 1st,
Mrs.
2023.
Okay, very good, and
Second.
second, please.
Second.
Mr. Donlin, I'm sorry, has that second. All in favor of tabling these minutes to the next meeting, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none. Next meeting is July 18th?
Yeah, the
Sounds
third
about right.
Thursday.
Yeah?
No, it's 20th.
The 20th?
Yeah,
Okay.
because it's 21st is a Friday.
Third Thursday of July.
In the
So-
third Thursday of August. I voted for you, Craig. I
Thank
got
you.
2 votes.
All right, very good. So everybody can get their vacations in. Just a point of order here. You know, if an applicant has a grievance, there's a proper recourse for that, a proper channel. But if the applicant is going to ask for relief, this process that just occurred is not the proper way and jeopardizes their own case. So that being said, just want to make that point known. Do we have any cases for July?
Not at the moment, although I have talked to a couple of individuals that are supposed to be applying, so I suspect by the time the deadline rolls around that we will.
Very good, okay. Any other business from any other members of the board? Seeing no gestures there, very good. Mr. Dietzel, you want to help us find the door?
I'll second.
Very good. Mr. Dietzel has the motion, Mr. Corbett has the second. All in favor of adjournment, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, we are adjourned. Have a good evening.